Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are doing fantastic. For today's video, I wanted to take it back to the years when I had babies and toddlers, because I no longer do. My youngest she's actually turning 7 this year. You know, I still look at her and she's like the baby of the family because my oldest is going to be 19. So it's hard to let go of that kind of feeling of baby and toddler. And because I have 6 kids, it's like I feel like there's just been always a baby or a toddler in the house. So this is the first, yeah, of not having that, of having kids and not having little ones in the house. I feel like if I talk about it anymore, I'm just gonna get sad. But anyway, my kids are all about 2 years apart. So that being said, I wanted to talk about kind of like how we got through homeschooling, having babies and toddlers, doing it, trying to figure out, you know, how to entertain them, just trying to get it done when you are in that season of life. I thought it would be a good throwback because I know a lot of you watching are still in that stage, or maybe you will be in that stage at some point, and it can be overwhelming. Like, it definitely can be overwhelming because homeschool on its own, some days are just overwhelming. You know, you throw babies and toddlers in the mix and it definitely amps up. It can amp up the feeling of like chaos and a little bit of out of controlness going on. For me, when we were homeschooling, like when we started homeschooling, my oldest was in grade 4, and then I had a child in grade 2, and then another child finishing up kindergarten. And so I had those 3, and then I had just had my 4th as well. Like I said, it went on and on and on. There was a lot of years. Also, I'm gonna throw in there just you know, for good measure, I'm gonna throw in there, if I hadn't just had a baby or a toddler, I was pregnant. So there's that too. But I just wanted to talk about what I did, how I got through it, and some of the things I've used, some of the techniques I've done, just kind of how to homeschool when you have little ones. I would say the very first thing that I learned was, babies and toddlers for sure, is to do the most important things in your homeschool during nap time. I don't know if that seems like the obvious thing, but as opposed to trying to push through certain subjects with your older kids, when, you know, you're dealing with the baby or there's a toddler running around. Now, I'm not saying you're not going to do anything when they're awake, but I find that, like, for me, during that time, I kept a very loose schedule of our day. I knew the things that I wanted us to get done. I knew subjects that we wanted to hit and get accomplished and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't really concretely have an order of how we did things, especially when I had a baby and I was nursing. Now, I will say though, at the start, you know, I would be way more confined to a chair, but I feel like, tell me if I'm the only one, but the more kids you have, you just learn, because you have other kids you have to take care of, you learn how to nurse on the go. It's not always the best, it's not always the most comfortable thing to do, but I will say that I did a lot of, like, I would be going from desk to desk and talking to the kids about different things and literally holding my baby and nursing them at the same time. So at some point you can do that, but even so, I didn't do that every single time. I would make sure that if I was going to be sitting down in a chair and I knew that I was going to be confined to that spot for however long, that I would save those times for like morning subjects, like morning basket type things, going through books, read alouds, devotionals, that kind of stuff is perfect because you're kind of just in your spot, your kids are in the room, and obviously depending on how old they are and how many you have, whether they're just sitting and listening, or maybe they are doing something else while you're reading or, you know, speaking to them or whatever, that's the perfect time to do those types of things. Another thing that I also found was doing some one-on-one work with them could also work out during those times. I'd sit on the couch, and then again, depending on what it was, as long as it wasn't something that was too involved, I would just get them to come and sit with me on the couch. You know, sometimes they were reading to me, or we were going through some of their work while I'm feeding the baby, and that worked out best as well. When the baby would go down for naps, that is when I would save the more intense subjects, the things that I know are going to be a little more involved, are going to take a little bit more of my attention, might take a little longer, where I need to really focus on a specific child, or maybe we're doing something as a group, but we have notebooks to fill out, or whatever it is. I would save those things for when the baby was napping or the toddler was napping. Now, I have had toddlers that have not always, well, even if your toddler naps, there's always a day when your toddler decides they don't want to nap, or their nap is like 5 minutes long and then they're up. So I understand that sometimes you can't even count on that necessarily, but I would just in general say that, you know, if you can, whenever you have your baby or your toddler down, try to save those times where you really need to, have like uninterrupted time with your other kids, to do that during that time. Now, in terms of just doing school when you have the baby / toddler around, obviously that's going to look different for everyone, and, you know, for every situation, and depending on how, like, actually how old they are, because there's a big difference between a baby that is a couple months old that really is just laying there, and a baby that is maybe crawling, or a baby that is like needs more stimulation and they're playing more and they're awake a little bit more, they're alert a little bit more, so you still sort of have to occupy them. Again, usually what I would do is just have certain things that we only pulled out and we only used during homeschool hours. So these were things that were kind of off limits outside of school. And the reason I did that is because then it takes longer for them to lose their novelty, and because, you know, the little ones know that they are only playing, or they only have access to these things during school, it keeps it fresh, it keeps it exciting, it keeps it interesting for them. So before I go into some of the things that I used to use, I will say this too. Obviously, this pertains more to a toddler than a baby, but I know sometimes it's tempting to like wake up and just want to get straight into school with your other kids, and then you're frustrated because the little one is wreaking havoc or whatever. And I just find, actually, I find this in general, even if you don't have a toddler, but you just have younger kids. Like I said, my daughter, she's 6 years old right now. I would say if you had to label it, she is the epitome of an easy child. And what I mean by that is that she just kind of goes with the flow. She's a very much go with the flow kind of kid. And she's never been one to get into things or get in trouble, or like I have to worry what she's doing. She's pretty good at occupying herself too. So I don't know if she's a very good example, but what I was going to say was, even with her, so she's 6 years old, we do our morning time and everything, but I just find that in general, if I do things with her first before I get to anybody else, it makes such a difference in the day. If you give the littler ones the first attention, the first of your attention, I guarantee you it will change how the rest of your day goes. That's what I have found every single time. They want you, right? You know, especially when they're little, right? They want you, and they kind of depend on you for the attention and to entertain them and all that kind of stuff, right? So if you give them that at the very start of the day, you'll be amazed at what a change it'll make in them. Because I find that when you don't do that, then they're like the whole day, they're just trying to get your attention. And you know, kids are smart and they're perceptive, and they know when you are being pulled in a million different directions. Like, they know, even when they're little, I feel like they really do know that. They get frustrated and you get frustrated and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I always tried to do. So even now with her, we do our morning time, which we do all together. And then when everyone kind of breaks off, all my older kids start on their independent work. Now, she has a version of independent work. She's only 6, so there's not a lot she can do entirely without me. But if I just tackle her work first and get her done first, she's more apt to like entertain herself the rest of the day. Then I can do whatever I'm doing with everybody else, or I can like set her up with stuff and she's not necessarily looking for my attention constantly, because I've already given her a bulk of that first thing. So even with little ones, I find the same thing. You know, even when I had babies, you're trying to like tucker them out. Like honestly, you're trying to get them tired enough so that when it's nap time, they take a nap, right? And so the more you can stimulate them and play with them and engage with them, the better chance you have of that downtime actually being downtime, and then, you know, allowing you to do what you need to do with the other kids. So that's kind of my overall advice. If you can do that, and if that means you have to kind of change things around, because it can really make a difference in how the rest of your day goes. In terms of like things to entertain a toddler, keep them busy, you know, because there's obviously they are awake for a lot of the time as well, and you don't necessarily just want to like stop what you're doing every time. I know it's going to depend on your child. You may just want to try your best to involve them in whatever you're doing the best you can according to their abilities. And what I mean by that is, even like when we do group time and morning basket and all that stuff, obviously when my little ones are really little, they are only comprehending so much. They're only really grasping what we're doing so much, but I would still make them a part of it, mainly because I just wanted them to see that this is a family affair. You know what I mean? Like, this is just something that we all do together and we're all a part of it. I usually have them on my lap or something, or I make sure that I sit next to them. And if I know, a lot of times when you're reading a story or you're doing a devotional or praying, I mean, they are more than capable of understanding and participating in that. But if we kind of branched out into something that was a little bit above them, or I knew that they were going to get bored or whatever, then I would just have like a coloring sheet or something for them to do that maybe somehow tied into what we were doing. And it doesn't even matter. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But then they're still there with you and they're listening to what's going on. They're still technically a part of what's, and you know, you'd be shocked too that sometimes things stick and they retain certain things and they may understand more than you think, but just kind of give them something to do that's still sort of quiet. So that's what worked for my kids, is them doing like some sort of a coloring activity, or even just like some paint, which I know might seem like excessive, but you know, like just a quick like a watercolor, just a couple of colors, a watercolor sheet. And you know, they're doing that while we are continuing with our morning time. If you can get them involved to any capacity possible when you are working with your other kids, that would be a big tip of mine. If it's a matter of just, you know, maybe your kids are not willing to do that, or now we're just talking about you're trying to do one-on-one things with other kids and all that kind of stuff. You just want to make sure that your toddler is like not getting into things they shouldn't be getting into, and that they're not bored and all that. I'm going to just talk about some things that we used. Nothing revolutionary. This is the kind of stuff, like I said, that we reserved only for school time. So it was always exciting when we brought these things out. So I think a given is Play-Doh. Who doesn't like Play-Doh? Every kid likes Play-Doh. So that would be something we would pull out all the time, Play-Doh. It wasn't really around with my earlier kids, but with some of my subsequent kids, kinetic sand is a big hit. So when we would do Play-Doh, I'd have like trays, these like plastic trays basically that I just got from, I don't know, either the dollar store or Walmart. I would open a couple of cans for them and they would play inside the trays. And then for the kinetic sand, I actually purchased like bins, clear plastic bins from Walmart with lids. I dumped the kinetic sand in there. I actually got a couple of cars and a few scoopers and things like that, and they play with it, and it's somewhat contained in the bin, just kind of do it on the floor. But those are both, you know, big hits with kids and entertain them for a long time. The other thing I would use is I just collected a bunch of different little plastic animals, like the small little bags of plastic animals. I also have like the little counting bears. Now, obviously, this is going to depend on your child, right? Of course, and their age and all that kind of stuff. But I would even use like magnets once they got to a certain age, and I was always there. It's like, you know, if your child can play with certain things, right? But like those kind of like little toys, buttons, little button sets and stuff, counters, things like that. And I would just put them in bins and then have like colored cups as well. And sometimes, like, even if they were not in the mood, because when my kids are young, like, I'm not concerned about them doing any kind of school necessarily, because I feel like they're learning all the time. They're learning while they're playing. But you could do things where you have colored cups and you ask them to sort the different items inside the cups according to color, or even like number things out or whatever. But even aside from that, I would just like give it to them and they can just go at it. They love playing with those little things and coming up with little scenarios and things. And I would use like cookie sheets. I had like a couple of cookie sheets that I bought specifically from like the dollar store, where they could stick the magnets on, and I had like magnets and then even numbers. I don't know if I had letters, but I definitely had numbers, like number magnets that they could play around with. That stuff only came out when we were doing school. Another thing was the lacing cards. You know, they're like the cards and they have the holes in them, and I think they were like farm animals. They have to lace, you know, through. So like that kind of stuff where I pull out something different every day, and they were usually like in the room with us. So regardless of whether, because we've kind of homeschooled all over and depending on the house we were in as well, I would just always keep them near me and set them up on the floor somewhere or at the table. And I know that there's no guarantee for how long it's going to keep them occupied, but that's the kind of stuff I found that interested them when they were little and kept them occupied long enough for me to work with other kids. Another thing too, which kind of sounds simple, because I think sometimes we might overthink it a little bit, like we're trying to set up very specific activities for toddlers when you really don't have to. Like you can, but you really don't have to. And I think that's why it gets exhausting and you're kind of like, I don't know what else to do. But you have to try to think like a toddler does. For them, like cutting and pasting anything, like anything. You could give them a blank piece of paper and basically just put scissors and glue there. There doesn't need to be a picture. There doesn't need to be instructions. They just want to cut and paste. They love it. And so you get them the little safety scissors. Again, they're doing these things while they're next to you anyway, but a little safety scissors and a glue stick. If you really want to go out there, you can give them the gloppy glue if you want, and literally just let them have at it. I'd give them some white paper, some construction paper, maybe even some stickers. They love stickers, so that's another great one. And you know, like I said, they are learning though, right? Because it's helping with their dexterity and just those fine motor skills, learning how to use the scissors and especially peeling stickers off and putting them on. Kids love that stuff, and it takes a while to do. Another thing was the dotters, you know, those paint dotters. They come in all kinds of colors and they basically just like dot. So again, you could just give them a blank piece of paper because they don't care either way. It's fun for them regardless. But also can specifically find sheets that are made for specifically for daughters that have like the circles. A lot of times there's numbers and letters and things like that where they can actually like fill it in. They see the dots and then they like follow it. I wouldn't worry about it, you know, just let them have at it kind of a thing, but they love that as well. Another thing that I used with, you know, especially with my younger daughter and like my two younger daughters, were the magnet tiles. Like any brand, just those magnet tiles. We got ours from Amazon. I don't remember the actual brand. I don't think it's the Magnetile brand, but regardless, I feel like a ton of brands make them now. They are a hit with everybody, but like my kids still play with them now, but I have them again in a clear bin and just putting those out. The kids love it, and it's so easy, especially like if they're little, you know, they're kind of, sometimes they have the Duplo blocks, like the Lego Duplo blocks, but sometimes that can be a little bit tricky for them too. But with the magnet tiles, it literally just like snaps together and you can make all kinds of things. It's like that open-ended kind of play, which I find is usually the best bet, because then it's like the creativity is just endless, you know? Just blocks, even just plain wood blocks for them to build. My boys always liked doing, like, they would bring their little cars or little whatever, Matchbox cars and build things for their cars and roads and things like that. My girls, they love mixing the magnet tiles and the blocks and building like houses or little castles for their dolls, and they'd bring their dolls down, and that's what I mean about it kind of gets their imagination going, and then a lot of times it like leads into something else that they are playing with as well. That's the kind of stuff that I would just say in general tends to work with, you know, little ones. If you reserve most of these things for only when you absolutely need it, in those moments that you're trying to do school, the novelty won't wear off as much, and your little ones will be excited because they know that that's the only time they get to play with some of these things. Now, of course, there's going to be tons of options. Like there's lots of things you could do. I'm kind of just trying to focus on the ones that I personally did with my kids and that are fairly easy to get. They're not very expensive. They're easy to keep on hand. But another tip I would just give you too is if at all you're capable of going outside. When the weather gets warm here, we live in Canada, so like our summer season is not very long, and so when it starts to get warm here, we are outside as much as we can. We try to go outside as much as possible and do school outside. So if you're able to do that, especially if you have like a fenced in yard where you could be doing school with your kids, because you know, kids just are different when they're outside. Like they just are. There's something about being outside, I find, just gets your kids going and kind of cures them of their boredom, no matter the age. And especially when they're little, they love to explore and look for bugs and dig in the dirt and whatever. And it's like, just let them do that, right? Like you're still there watching them, but they're kind of getting to explore in a safe way. You know, if you have like a sand table or a water table or something like that. And then at the same time, they're expending a lot of energy, which is hopefully going to help when it's nap time. This is never my first option, only because I think especially when kids are little, there's just so much for them to do and explore and play. That should be their primary source of entertainment and how they spend their time. But we did utilize on occasion, we love the app ABC Mouse. Most of my kids have at one point used ABC Mouse. We just love it. It's a great site. It caters to the age of your child, and there's everything there from phonics and ABCs and numbers and songs and nursery rhymes and like everything. There's no shame also in doing that for just a little bit of time if you want to do some sort of screens. Now, if you're trying to keep your child away from screens altogether, I totally get it too, because we are very, very minimal when it comes to that, especially when they're young. But if you just want to give them a few minutes on a tablet or something like that, ABC Mouse is fantastic. I highly recommend that. That was pretty much the only one we let them use. And then maybe the odd time we would put a show on. And at the time it was, this is gonna date me now, but at the time it was like Baby Einstein. Do you remember the Baby Einstein videos? Maybe you don't, but Baby Einstein, and what was the other one? It was Baby Einstein and another one that was similar to Baby Einstein. And it's not so much that I thought that they were going to be like Einstein, but it was just the way that they were filmed with the puppets and the characters, and my kids all loved it. And so we put like one episode of that on. It was like 20 minutes or something like that. And again, that was always like a treat for them because we didn't do screens a whole lot. Yeah, so that's kind of my advice on how to homeschool when you have littles. You know, I'm probably gonna sound like every other mom who is out of that stage, but honestly, cherish that time, cherish those moments. I'm not saying that there aren't hard times, and I know it can be frustrating sometimes and feel like you're not getting enough done, but you're in that stage of life because that's the stage of life you're in. And so don't discount the things that you're doing with your little ones mean just as much as checking off that list and getting those subjects done in your homeschool, as opposed to seeing it as a disturbance and as something that's getting in the way of what you have to do. If you change how you look at it and you just realize like, this is where I'm at, this is where my family is at, I'm in a stage where I have little ones right now. They look to me for everything, right? They look to me for entertainment, for comfort, for company. They want to do everything with you, especially when they're little, and the time flies. There's going to be plenty of time that they are independent and they don't, you know, need you as much in the same way as they do now. Yeah, like it was a crazy time with 6 and them all being like 2 years apart. And like I said, being pregnant and then having a baby and then being pregnant and then having a baby. So then I'd have babies and toddlers. There are days where the baby's being fussy, the toddler's being fussy, and or you feel like you're like nursing nonstop, or they're not going down for their nap. And that's what I'm trying to say. Just don't allow that to remove the joy from your home, from your homeschool, from your family, because you know your role as a mom is so much more than just math and science. So on that note, I hope this encouraged you. I hope you're doing fantastic. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.